Hello, happy Sunday morning. A little bit of rain, a little bit of sunshine, lots of butterflies. I am reading to you from The Art of Communication by Thich, Nhat, Hanh, and I would be very, very thankful, grateful if you would come on my YouTube channel and subscribe. I also have a blog that I write at cheriehansen.com, which has 75,000 subscribers. So moving on from communicating with others, he is discussing when there is a severance of relationships in a family or friendships and how to address that. It takes courage to acknowledge difficulties in relationships. You may think you will just wait until the other person comes to you first, but that may not happen. You can't wait. You can begin the practice of restoring communication by modeling open-hearted, compassionate dialogue. You may have to give yourself a deadline for making a start. When people come to week-long retreats, I give them a deadline of the last night of the retreat to begin the reconciliation. If you are truly practicing, others will see that and be affected by it. They may not be able to show it right away, but what you say and the look in your eyes will have an effect. The next chapter, the suffering of pride. There is a well-known Vietnamese story about a young couple who suffered deeply because they didn't practice mindful communication. The husband went off to war and left his pregnant wife behind. 3 years later, when he was released from the army, his wife came to the village gate to welcome him and brought along their little boy. It was the first time the man had seen his child. When the young couple saw each other, they could not hold back the tears of joy. They were so grateful that the young man had survived and come home. In Vietnam, there is a tradition that when an important event happens, you make an offering on an altar to our ancestors, and you tell them what has happened. The wife went to the market to buy flowers, fruits, and other provisions for an offering to place on the altar. The father stayed home with his son and tried to persuade the little boy to call him Daddy, but the little boy refused. He said, "Mister, you aren't my daddy. My daddy is someone else. He used to come and visit us every night. Whenever he came, my mother would talk to him for a long time and cry and cry. And when my mother sat down, the man sat down. And when my mother lay down, he also lay down. So, you are not my daddy." Hearing these words, the young father's heart turned to stone. He could no longer smile. He became silent. When his wife returned, the man didn't look at her or speak to her anymore. He was very cold, and he acted as though he despised her. She didn't understand why, and she began to suffer deeply. After the ceremony to make an offering to the ancestors, it's traditional to make the offering from the altar, and then the family sits down and enjoys the meal with happiness. But the young man performed the offering. He didn't do this. He left the house. He went into the village, and he spent his time in the liquor shop. He got drunk because he couldn't bear his suffering. When the husband came home, it was very late, and they did the same thing every evening. He never talked to his wife, never looked at her, never ate at home. The young lady suffered so much she couldn't bear it, and on the 4th day, she jumped into the river and she drowned. That evening after the funeral, the young father and the boy came home. As the man lit the kerosene lamp, the little boy shouted, "Here is my father," and he pointed to the shadow of his father on the wall. It turned out the young woman used to talk to her shadow every night because she missed her husband so much. One day the little boy had said, "Everyone in the village has a father. Why don't I have one?" In order to calm the little boy, she pointed to her shadow that night on the wall and said, "There is your father." Of course, when she sat down, the shadow would sit down too. Now the young father understood. His wrong perceptions had been wiped away. But it was too late. What if the young man had gone to his wife and asked, "Darling, I've suffered so much in the last few days. I don't think I can survive. Please help me. Please tell me, who is that person who used to come every night and with whom you talked and cried?" That's a very simple thing to do. If he had done this, the young lady would have had a chance to explain. The tragedy would have been averted and they would have recovered their happiness very easily. That's the direct way. But he didn't do this because he was so deeply hurt, and his pride prevented him from going to her and asking for help. The woman suffered so much as well. She was deeply hurt because of her husband's behavior, but she didn't ask for his help. Perhaps if she asked her husband what was wrong, he would have told her what their son had said. She didn't because she too was caught in pride. A wrong perception can cause a lot of suffering. All of us are subjects to misunderstanding. We live with the wrong perceptions every day. That's why we have to practice meditation and looking deeply into the nature of our perceptions. Whatever we perceive, we have to ask ourselves, are you sure your perception is right? To be safe, you have to ask. We're subject to many wrong perceptions in our daily lives. It may be that the other person didn't have the intention to hurt you. Mindful communication has the potential to ease so much of the unnecessary suffering in a relationship. And this is a story which illustrates in a dramatic way and in a severe way what we go through all the time. When I'm coaching clients, they will say, another person hates me, or I don't know why, I've done something wrong. And the question is always, is this true? So we can sit with our thoughts. We can watch our thoughts come across, like watching fish swimming in a river or watching birds fly past. And just look at them and be curious. I see this thought. Is it true? And if we're not prideful, if we are motivated by curiosity and openness, we can go to another person and say, I am perceiving that you are rejecting me, that you don't like me, that I'm doing something wrong, that I am somehow wrong. Can you please help me with this? Can you please explain to me what is going on so that I won't suffer any longer? It takes a lot of courage to push pride aside and just be curious. But this is the way that we can finally get to a place where the purpose of communication is, I sit with you so that each of us can lower the other person's suffering. And that is why we're here, to be compassionate. Thank you.